Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to season 3 of HerJourney2Self Podcast. My name is Tamara and I am your host. I am so happy to be back for the new year. A lot has happened since last season. I finally traveled after almost 2 years, got on a plane again, went to church. Selah got dedicated, who, by the way, is going to turn 2 next month. Like, I could not even deal, like, what is happening? But she finally met the remainder of her immediate family, so that has just been such a joy. There has also been many challenges and some loss. As some of you may already know, my close friend passed away in November of 2021. She's also Selah's godmother. So just thinking about Selah not having her as she grows up, has been challenging. But I'm thankful that she did have some time with her. She spent that very first week with me after I had Selah. And, then the pandemic hit. Selah is basically a pandemic baby. She was born February 2020. And basically 3 weeks later, New York had shut down. We were in lockdown. Then some months later, in June, we moved to Buffalo. So, it was all of that time that we didn't get to spend together. Of course, we did a lot of video calls, but when Selah was about 7 months, we went back to New York for work and she watched her for the day. So looking back now, I am just so grateful that she had that time with her. And just thinking about her, she was such a beautiful soul, and she was so happy for me when I started the podcast. She was like the biggest fan. After every episode, she would call me just to chat about what the show was about and how something I said impacted her. And I will be forever grateful for that, for her love, for her support, and for her friendship. So I have decided to dedicate this season to my dear friend, Michelle. All right. So as I mentioned in the trailer, this season I interviewed some amazing and powerful women. I am so excited for you all to get to know them and just hear their stories and their journeys. But I thought that it was only fitting to kick off the season with some PowHERful affirmations. Now, before we get started, a little bit about affirmations, because I believe that you need to believe the affirmations that you say. And I know that may be contrary to what you have heard before, but I really take my advice from Dr. Caroline Leaf when it comes to this. She's a neuroscientist, so she has done a lot of study on the brain and understanding the mind. So once I really dug into her research, that's where my process of affirming myself really started to develop and grow. And I highly recommend reading her newest book, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. Highly recommend it. But, in her research, she actually says that positive thinking can actually be quite toxic. I know, like, what? And she says that, if I'm going to just say 5 positive affirmations and 10 gratitude statements and memorize 5 scriptures like a magic potion, you're basically just putting a Band-Aid on an open wound. That's like mind blown. Okay. And this just resonates with me so much because, as you know, if you have been a listener for a while or watching YouTube, for a while, then you know that for me, when it comes to mindset and healing, I'm all about getting to the root. So she really speaks about how our thoughts are real, and she says that they're kind of like little trees that, they grow. Our thoughts grow in our mind, and we can actually create kind of like a war between our positive thoughts and our negative thoughts if we simply are trying to just positively think our negative thoughts away. Again, really look into her Dr. Caroline Leaf. You will not be disappointed, hopefully. And even when I looked into her process, I found that I was already doing a lot of these things already. So she has this process called the neural cycle, and there are 5 steps to this cycle. So the first one is to gather awareness, become aware of how you're feeling and what you're thinking. Embracing our issues is giving our thoughts permission. And this really sounds a lot like, taking inventory. I always say that you need to take inventory of where you are and where you want to go, take inventory of your thoughts. So I definitely relate to this. Step 2 is to reflect. Again, relate to this. Ask yourself why. Why questions, to unearth your past or hidden pain. 3, write. So, all of us who love journaling, this is great, to literally get your thoughts out of your head and onto paper. Writing brings order to chaotic thinking. And recheck. So, to reframe the situation or the story that you have been telling yourself and eliminating false emotions and replacing them with the truth. Man, I'm just going to get vulnerable because this is what all this podcast is all about. So even when it came to season 3, this is the very first time that I have guests on the show. And I was super nervous about reaching out to different women because a lot of the women that I reached out, well, all of the women I reached out to, I admire them. They're professionals and successful. And I was nervous about asking them to come on, my little show. I already started, with the limiting beliefs. But my very first podcast interview, I sent the email saying, okay, I'm going to be hanging out in the studio like 10 to 15 minutes beforehand, just checking sound to make sure everything is working. And there's a waiting room. Once you're in the waiting room, I will let you in. So, it gets to be about 5 minutes before go time and there's nobody in the waiting room. So, I'm just sitting there waiting and then it's time to start recording and she's not there. So I quickly checked Instagram. I saw that she had just like posted a story 10 minutes prior. So immediately all of these negative thoughts start rushing through my head. And I'm like, oh, maybe she forgot. Like this really isn't important to her because, it's just, little show. Who am I? This is not going to be successful. Why did I think that this was going to work? And just, going down this rabbit hole of negativity. So I think like 5 minutes pass, I send her a quick DM saying, hey, are we still good to go? And then I check my email and, she's like, oh, hey, Tamara, I'm here in the waiting room, but I don't see you. And I'm like, I just spent literally like 10 minutes basically putting myself through an anxiety attack and attacking myself. And it had nothing to do with who I am, my worth, my identity, my purpose. It was a technical glitch. And I had, created this false narrative in my head. And that is such a dangerous thing to do. Last year, I did therapy for a few months. And one thing that my therapist said that I think about like on a weekly basis now is she told me, you don't live in reality. And I was like, oh, okay. But it was true, creating these false narratives in my mind based on a past feeling of disappointment. There was no need for me to beat myself up and, tell myself I'm a failure and like this isn't going to work. It was all about technology not working the way it was supposed to work. So I quickly disabled the waiting room feature so she can just enter into the studio session herself. And then we had an amazing time just sitting and chatting with each other. So really, really, really take inventory of where these false narratives are coming from. So the fifth step is active reach. So discover a simple statement or action you can do to replace it each time those thoughts creep up again. So I absolutely just love this five-step process. It is so simple and easy to do. And I don't use affirmations to suppress negative thoughts or feelings, but as a vehicle to process and create change. And I have found that in my own process, there's usually an opening in a negative thought or belief where I can affirm myself. For example, I may have the thought that I'm not beautiful, but in getting to the root of that thought and really digging deep, I may ask myself, well, is there anything about me that I find beautiful? And I may say, I believe I have beautiful eyes. So, boom, there's my opening. And I can truly affirm myself while working on restructuring my thoughts. And even if you can't find an opening in a specific thought, you can be committed to the transformation that you want to see. So, you may affirm yourself by saying, I am committed to finding beauty within myself. It is all a process, a very active and intentional and tangible process. So let's jump in to how I am affirming myself this year. So, the first one is I welcome change and transformation into my life. I think this is so powerful because it puts you in the mindset of expectancy. And also, think about when you go to a restaurant and the hostess welcomes you and you feel like they want you there, and you just know that you are going to have a great time. So, it cultivates an atmosphere of positivity for change and transformation to thrive. The next one is I am worthy of change and transformation. And this is something I have been affirming for quite some time now. If you have ever struggled with feeling unworthy, then this is for you. Remind yourself of your worth. Remind yourself that you are not damaged goods. Even if you do still have those thoughts on occasion, check yourself and ask, do I really feel this way about myself? Because a lot of the time, those thoughts are just reactions to a situation. And I have found that many times we rely on the comfort of toxicity to validate disappointment. It's kind of like we want to feel sorry for ourselves and we want to sit in the pain because we want sympathy. And this is why it's so important to do the work to get to the root. Remind yourself that the origin of that thought stemmed from, maybe not getting into the school that you wanted to go to, or not getting the promotion that you worked so hard for. And this feeling of disappointment is familiar, but you've already done the work. So you understand that a disappointment in life does not define you. There are many times, that I have to tell myself, now, girl, you know that you don't actually believe that. Those are just your emotions talking. The next one is I am mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually ready for success. We need to be prepared for the success that we want. And I think this process is so beneficial because it brings to our attention what we need to work on. So this may sound like a great affirmation that makes you feel all, good and warm inside, but then you realize, well, maybe I'm not ready mentally or emotionally. Maybe there are some things I need to work on. Maybe that's why I feel like I keep sabotaging my life, So you may change it to I am going to mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually prepare myself for success. Next is I cultivate healthy habits in my life. Always go back to your why. Why do you believe in creating healthy habits? How does health affect the different areas of your life? Knowing our why keeps us grounded, but it also keeps us motivated and determined. And lastly, I understand the weight of my words and I use them wisely. This one is powerful. And I hope by now we all understand the power of our words. How we talk to ourselves and about ourselves and other people is so important. It affects how we feel about ourselves, how we show up, how we operate. It impacts how we are as a leader, a businesswoman, a wife, a mom, whatever the title may be. Words are powerful. So those are my top 5 affirmations for 2022. I know that this list is going to continue to grow, and I encourage you to affirm yourself in truth. And let me know how this process works out for you, because again, the way I affirm is not the typical way, but I'm not a typical person and I love that. And that is actually a great affirmation for myself. So find a great affirmation for yourself as well. So thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. Remember that your testimony is not for yourself, it is for the world. Until next time, peace, love, and light.